Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm bringing you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and, of course, author interviews. Today, I'm talking to the author of the best-selling novel, Adventures on Terra, Book 1, Beginnings. The novel has been a surprise hit within the LitRPG community. It's currently number 1 in video game adaptation novels and among the top 10 in action and adventure fantasy novels, and has even broken into the top 100 novels on Amazon in the recent past. Welcome to the podcast, RM Mejia. Wow. That is an amazing introduction. Thank you very much for your very kind words. In all honesty, I have to give full credit for my novel success to the LitRPG community as a whole. Everyone has been super supportive. I've really been blown away by their level of just willingness to buy my novel and enjoy it, apparently. Tons of good reviews, and I can't thank everyone enough. Aw, that's really sweet, man. For those of you who don't know your background or your work, though, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? Oh, sure. Let me see. Well, I'm really just a regular guy. I discovered LitRPG a little over a year and a half ago-ish, and I fell in love with the genre and I consumed everything that I could. Eventually, with a lot of encouragement from the LitRPG community, I wrote my own story and I published it, and here we are. Wow, man, that's totally interesting. Let me ask you though, do you have actual training as a professional writer? Oh, heck no. I gotta say, I went to college for some engineering stuff, then I switched to education. So I have a really cool understanding of physics, mathematics, science, history, that kind of stuff. However, creative writing was never really a thing for me. The only writing I'd ever done before this book were like college papers. It really took me like a good 6 or 7 months to get the writing for this story done, and it was always kind of a challenge for me. But good beta readers. My wife edited it on a daily basis as I wrote, so that really helped me out. Well, man, I gotta say you're doing well for your very first novel. Very commendable. Now, for those watching and listening, though, can you tell them specifically about your novel, Adventures on Terra? Maybe give them a kind of a summary. Yeah, sure. Armand Ellington dies after a 72-hour gaming marathon, and instead of going to some kind of afterlife, he instead is transported to a world Terra, a world governed by rules that are kind of like the RPG games he loves to play. He goes on adventures, he fights monsters, he crafts and levels up. And more than that, though, Armand finds the friends and family he never had on Earth. A little more seriousness, I guess. This story is totally from my heart. It's about being a gamer and being transported to a world that kind of makes sense to you as a gamer. There's action, adventure. There's kind of a love or romance story in there a little bit, but it mostly focuses on leveling up, exploring skill trees, magic systems that I thought were kind of cool. I wrote this as something I would like to read, but I also kind of wrote it as something that somebody who's not into LitRPG would hopefully be able to enjoy. There's tons of my kind of jokes and senses of humor and things. So I hope everybody enjoys it, but that's kind of a summary for the novel. Well, thank you very much for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about your main characters, though? What makes them special, that kind of stuff. Sure. Happy to give you that insight. Main character of the story is Armand Ellington. He is an orphan, a geek, a gamer, and an RPG lover. He honestly really fit right in with the LitRPG group. And when he's transported to Terra, he gets a chance to create the life that he's kind of always wanted but never had on Earth. He uses the rules he knows from Terra and combines them with his gaming knowledge to kind of level up slightly faster than would normally occur. The entire story takes place in just a couple months, and he gets to level 4. I try to make him not overpowered at all. I'm trying to make it a more realistic setting of level progression in a story. I never wanted him to be so powerful that he wasn't challenged by the world. But he himself is kind of just an ordinary guy who's never had a family. Well, he had a family, but they died, and so he's always kind of yearned for that sense of community. And within the story, that's kind of his part of his journey in finding that community, those friends, those family. There's also little things about love and whatnot. But I think other characters are just as important as the main character Armand. He has a guide in the world. Her name is Mary. She's a fairy, and she's pretty snarky and sassy. Definitely one of my favorite characters. She helps him get used to the rules on Terra and eventually becomes his friend. There are some other creatures and characters in the story that I can't really talk about without spoiling things, but I really try to populate the world with a variety of different races: beastmen, elves, halflings, and of course humans, lots of humans, but also monster races like kobolds, trolls, and that aren't just XP points for people to kill. They have distinctive cultures, backstories, motivations, and I try to incorporate all that into the story as well to make it a little more interesting than just kill a thing because it's different. You know, well, it's pretty cool that you included that kind of background information for your characters. Now, your story is set in the lit RPG genre, which we're familiar with. But what do you think distinguishes that genre, and what drew you to writing in that particular genre of fiction? Uh, what is lit RPG? That's a kind of a loaded question depending on who you ask. For me, lit RPG are stories with role playing game mechanics. Now, regardless of whether they're sci fi or fantasy stories, the story worlds take place in worlds that are governed by game mechanics that are just there. They're plainly stated, and characters become more powerful within those rules, and it's not hidden. You see level up notifications or skill gains or whatever it is, but there's definitely that sense of progress or the character becoming more powerful because they use these rules. And I think that's a big draw of Little RPG, that sense of I can become powerful when I understand how things work in this rule that makes sense. And what drew me personally to the genre was that combination of being a gamer and a voracious reader. I love the fact that I can understand the rules of a little RPG world, unlike the real world sometimes, unfortunately, and that no character and that any character rather can become powerful within this world. I first came in contact with Little RPG again about a year and a half ago. It's Sword Art Online, and I just fell in love with the idea of living in a game world like a lot of people, especially with like the convergence of virtual reality that's been popping up recently. It's just been something that's fired at my imagination. And from there, I read the night level version of Sword Art Online, and then I just fell down the rabbit hole of lit RPG. Well, I'm really glad that you found something that you love so much. That's kind of rare in life. I'm totally happy for you. Now, when it comes to writing, what is your process? Um, are you a fly by the seat of your pants kind of writer, or are you a creative, detailed outlines kind of dude? You think I have a process? That's pretty generous of you. Thank you. But writing's super hard for me. It's definitely the subject in school that was always the most challenging for me. It took me again 6 or 7 months to put this together, edit it, that whole thing. And I did it a subchapter at a time. I started and I just had a regular schedule of doing it. Um, Most of the beginning was like a stream of conscious kind of thing based on other stories that I had read, and then it diverged into original storytelling and just a combination of like all my years of gaming. Turns out that the last 25 years I spent gaming has really just secretly been research for this little RPG novel. Um, but once I got comfortable writing on a regular basis, I really started thinking about where I wanted the story to go, and I started planning out a few different points. I actually planned out the ending before I finished, like the middle of the story, just so I knew where I was heading to. Like there, for example, I knew that Armand needed a guide to find out the rules for Terra, so I had Mary the Fairy. I knew he needed a place to have armors and weapons and a place to kind of restock stuff and learn skills. So I created, Restrian. like this small town village next. And I knew I wanted him a place to have monsters to kill, so there was a dungeon there for him to delve. Um, I also knew that I didn't want all the monster races in the story to be bad guys. I wanted a more full understanding of potential cultures in this kind of gamified world. So I created social structures, cultures. I did some backstory stuff that I include in the story, some histories of the world, that kind of stuff. Um, and other than that, they're just jokes and adventures that were written on the fly. I wrote mostly after work at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and on weekends. And that's kind of what my writing process was, if that's answers that question. Well, that is definitely an answer. Thank you very much. Do you actually remember the moment that you decided to become a writer, and why do you write? Truthfully, I don't really think of myself as a writer. I'm just kind of more of a guy who wrote a story and kind of got lucky that people were willing to read it. Um, that's how I personally view myself. I I know there are tons of more talented writers who do this professionally, and they've dedicated almost a lot of their lives to the craft of writing. And I'm just a guy who tells a story and has a nice adventure story that people kind of enjoy. Um, that's how I think of myself. But I do remember the moment I decided to write, though. I was reading this LitRPG story, and it was just kind of complaining about the weird plot and all the grammar and spelling errors. And my wife kind of got tired of it and told me that I should write one better if I thought I could do it. So I did. Started writing a couple days later, and at night, my wife would read and edit the story in exchange for, foot massages. And it kind of became a habit between the two of us. I'd write, she'd edit, and get foot massages, and it was great motivation for me because I always wanted to make my wife happy. And I started writing this story for her. After a while, I wrote jokes so she'd laugh, and when she read it at night, including pop culture references that she'd giggle at, things from movies we watched together, romance novel jokes. She's into those things, and just kind of things that would keep her interested, even though she's not into lit RPG. I kind of figured eventually that if I could keep her interested in this kind of story, then it would appeal to a lot of other people as well, who aren't familiar with video games and all the minutia of gaming mechanics. And so that's kind of what it became to me, and that's how you know, why I started to write. Aw, man, that's pretty adorable of you. Gee golly. Um, okay, so we know why you write from your answer. How about what's the hardest and easiest thing about writing for you specifically? Oh golly. I'd have to say the easiest thing for me is dialogue. Writing conversations is relatively smooth and seamless because the characters are just in my brain. I know their personalities pretty well. So creating conversations between them is it's pretty easy. The hardest thing for me is probably creating a believable plot. Things for the characters to do that mean something. Creating themes, formatting, all that actual writer stuff. Those are definitely some challenges. Thank you very much. Tell me, how have you been publishing this particular novel, though? Give us some insight into why you chose this particular method. Well, I publish Adventures on Terror on the Kindle Direct Publishing platform. It's a self-publishing platform that lets authors upload their manuscript, um, cover art, put the novel up on Amazon for people to buy fairly simply. I chose it because it was kind of easy to publish that way. There's a pretty low barrier to entry these days for publishing, um, at least by yourself. But the downside is that you're also responsible for everything else. You publish yourself, you do your own marketing. Um, you have to have an organized way for people to discover your book and get excited about its release. You have to decide whether you want to invest in extra time and money into creating a print edition or an audiobook, as the case may be. And you kind of have to learn a lot about the particulars of the royalty program on the Kindle Direct Publishing and if it works for you. and whether or not want to participate in the Kindle Unlimited program. There are a lot of decisions that you have to make as a self-publisher that you don't necessarily have to make if you go the traditional route. Yes, it's easier to self-publish, but there are additional challenges that you just have to be aware of and kind of do a little research and prepare for. But for me, it worked out perfectly because I don't mind learning new things. I actually enjoy it, and it's been kind of an interesting and fun and educational journey to self-publish. Okay, so how do you market your books? Um, I was pretty fortunate to be connected to the Lit RPG group through Facebook and my website. Um, I just really let them know, the group that is, that I published a book. I kind of talked about it a little bit in the months coming up to it as I was writing it, and I'd been publishing on, I don't know, the Royal Road before that. But when I actually published it, I just let them know, and the community was super supportive, and they bought it, and they left lots of great reviews, and that pushed my novel into the Amazon feeds for more people, and they liked it, and that cycle just kind of repeated for me. The only marketing that I actually paid for was through Fiverr, which is a demand gig service that puts people who want to do a job, people who are willing to pay at least $5 to do a one-time or short-term work. And in this case, I used marketing for books through social media on that platform. I didn't want to spend like a ton of money and just get no results, but I figured, $5 here or there, just to kind of test the waters, was a reasonable risk, and it had pretty decent results. But I'd say most of my marketing success, if you want to call it that way, was just telling the group and them just being super awesome and supportive as a lit RPG community, and supporting a knucklehead like me on his first novel. Thank you very much for sharing those marketing tips. I'm sure a lot of people are appreciating that advice, or at least your experience of it. Do you have any other advice for authors? Advice for other authors. Okay, I'd have kind of two advices for other authors. One, find a group that's as passionate for your type of story as you are. Talk to them, create real connections, contribute to the group. Personally, I'd rather have 100 people that are super passionate about supporting me than 1,000 people who are just casually interested. So finding your geek group is really important to me. My second piece of advice for authors is going to be keep writing, working. Don't give up. It's really easy to get frustrated and get writer's block and just kind of put it away, or think it's not good enough and that you have to work on it for another year. Don't be afraid to pull the trigger on publishing, man or woman. We live in a time when the barrier to putting your story out for purchase is almost doesn't exist. Yeah, there's a lot of extra work you're going to have to do while writing and editing, and even more after you publish it. But there's really no gatekeeper telling you that you can't publish. Well, thank you very much for that. Before we finish up, I know your readers won't forgive me if I don't ask this at least, but when will book 2 be ready to read? You know, Writing is kind of challenging for me. Right now, I'm working on getting the audiobook version of the novel set up and going. Hopefully, that'll be out by February. Cross my fingers that it goes okay. I'm also outlining book 2 as we speak, and writing as fast as I can. Again, writing is hard for me, so it might take a little while, but I'm definitely doing the as good a job as I can, because people are apparently anxious to read the second book. I've gotten several messages on Facebook and by email saying that people really enjoy it and they want a second book. And I understand the lit RPG addiction, guys. So I'm trying to work on it as soon as possible and get it out to you guys. An audiobook? That is pretty stinking awesome, man. Pretty ambitious as well. Well, that's it, everyone. Mr. Mejia, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. Can you tell your audience a little bit about how they can discover your work, find out more about you, give them anywhere you want them to go? Work. Yeah, sure. I have an author page on Facebook and Amazon. Once I start writing something, I'm really okay with posting it on the real road and my personal side for people who want to read and comment on it. So that'll be up there at some point. Excellent. Thank you very much again for talking to me today, Mr. Mejia. We'll be sure to include all the links to anywhere people can find you, including the link to your book on Amazon, which I believe is available as an ebook, printed book, and according to what you told us, an audio book in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. Cross my fingers for you, man. But again, thank you very much for talking to us. It's been kind of fun. I appreciate it. I'm sure they hope the audience did as well. Thank you, everyone who's listening and watching to this. I appreciate you taking the time to just, chill out with me, hang out, talk about things that we both love, hopefully, LitRPG. Till the next time I see you folks, though, remember to go read some LitRPG.